Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 2 o'clock. I wonder if we can make a start, please. I think firstly I'd like to welcome our two new members here, Councillor Sue Allen, from the Conservative Party in Peterborough, and Councillor Charlie Swift from the Independent Party in Peterborough. I think the first thing to say is we want to congratulate Councillor Swift on his anniversary today, on his 60th anniversary. But I think before you clap him, you ought to know it's his 60th anniversary as a service in local government and not his age. So, which makes you wonder, Charlie, how old you are. We're not going to ask you. But congratulations on 60 years tomorrow, I think it is, of local government service.
Correct.
Well done. Well done.
Five years old,
Huh?
Started when he was 5 years old.
Charlie, what's the story about you and your winkle pickers?
You told me earlier on. Well, the first meeting I ever attended, so I was a teddy boy in those days, and I went in a teddy boy jacket, open shirt and neck, Rocker Creeper shoes on, and nobody spoke to me. Not my own party, Conservative Party, officer or anybody. They just totally ignored me.
Well, you won't find that here, I promise you. Okay, item 1 is apologies. Do we have any apologies? Councillor Chapman hasn't arrived. I still expecting him, so we'll see. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations they wish to make? No? In that case, we move on to item 3, which is decisions. The first one is on the appointments to committees and their outside bodies, and to receive an update on the medical allowances scheme. So I think Dawn, who's going to go first?
I'm going to do the two of us.
I'm going to ask Jeff and Dawn to take this one together.
Yes, because obviously of the result of the elections in Peterborough, the representation of the body generally of the political parties has changed. So as you now know, there's no overall control. And so the proportionality of the committees, it was difficult to fit in the way that the parties have been allocated seats now into the numbers. So we had to change the numbers of members sitting on the major committees to actually accommodate easily the new political balance. So that's why we've increased policy and resources committee up to 8 members and overviewed scrutiny to 8, because it then can all fit in rather nicely. The other committees haven't really changed very much. It would change the appointments committee, that's right. But the others are pretty much the same. We've also got to reflect the overall proportionality of the parties in relation to the total number of seats, committee seats that exist in the Fire Authority. And it's not quite as easy to do that as doing it on the major committees. So what we've suggested, which you actually get the right number, if you look at the appeals panel, so there's appeals pensions on page 2, appeals pensions committee 3 members, Fire Authority discipline committee 3 members, and Fire Authority appeals committee 3 members. If the Conservative Party seats one of its 2 seats from each of these committees and allocates it to UKIP, Labour and Independent, then we get the exact match of all the number of seats overall. So if you're happy to agree to that, the suggestion is that the
pensions is ceded to the Independents, Fire Authority Discipline Committee to UKIP, and Fire Authority Appeals Committee to Labour.
So if you're happy with that, then it just matches everything neatly. Well, I think Dawn's been around and got all the group leaders, and I've got nominations for all of your seats in all of your committees. So we'll draw up a new list and circulate it to you as well. Are there any things which are outstanding?
The only things I've got outstanding is a few of the subs and some of the other outside bodies. What I was going to suggest is if you delegate that to Jeff Taylor in discussion with the chairman outside
And
of
with
the
the group
meeting.
leaders as well.
Yeah.
You just then tell me we can fill the gaps. If you're happy with
But all the main committees, we've got memberships for those.
that. Okay.
That
So if
will
you're happy with that.
that will go out when?
I can attach that to the minutes.
Yeah. So go very quickly.
Thank you very much. Okay.
So we're adopting Appendix A because there's a new independent group.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair.
There's a name tag here, there's no...
Leaves on the line. Leaves on the line. Never had that trouble with finished. You have sandboxes. One of these don't have sandboxes. Yeah, exactly.
Before we leave this particular item, at the bottom of page 2 on the list, you've got Joint Consultative Committee, which hasn't met, I don't think, sometimes, certainly not since I've been on the authority. The reason for having this on there, and why I think we need to take it fairly seriously, is because we did say last year when we were a new authority that we would look very carefully at the fire service for the future over the next 4 years. I'm a firm believer, having got round a lot of the fire stations, the firefighters themselves, as well as members here and officers, can see some real serious changes coming in the future. And the Chief and I thought that the JCC would be the body which we could pull together and have discussions with members, officers and firefighters on the issues in front of us. So there is a structure there which I would like to use in the future, in the near future, to start that process rolling, if that's okay. Councillor Shines.
You quite rightly mentioned firefighters. Is there a representation of the white collar staff as well on that committee?
Unison haven't been invited today, but if it's going to be a true joint consultative committee, then we would invite Unison.
Perhaps we can look at the membership in due course, yeah.
Chairman, I should have drawn your attention to Appendix C, which is the schedule attached to the members' allowance scheme. It shows you in the second column the current allowances which are paid for the special responsibility allowances. Because the independent group has now been created, we'll have to put in a line there for the independent group. So if you're happy with that bringing, as well as the recommendations on the front of the paper. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that item? Thank you. We'll move to item 4, please. Final revenue and capital and budget commission 2013-14. And I'll ask Matthew to comment, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully the paper's relatively self-explanatory. I have just handed out an updated appendices because our reliance on spreadsheets perhaps is a little overburdensome sometimes, but there's some updated percentage figures in there. All of the key variance figures are the same, just the variances that we calculate correctly. In terms of where we ended up for the year, you'll see that on page 3 there's a final under overspend position reported of £26,000 underspent. That is after effectively we've taken schemes that have already started in the old financial year. That money's effectively committed already, it's already committed to spend. So we've actually taken that into account and come to that final position. And what we've broken those carry forwards, as we call them, down in a bit more detail. But the majority of them are regarding purchase of appliances, which members will recall we bought 9 new appliances last year to bring our fleet up to a very modern point, and hopefully we can start to take the foot off the accelerator, excuse the pun, in the future in terms of purchasing appliances and saving money. And then Burwell Community Fire Station, which is well advanced, but it started last financial year. It will be finished this financial year. We finished on August 28th. But again, that funding was committed for last year, so we carried it forward to make sure it's spent. So effectively we end up with a position of £26,000 underspent. If members look at the detail on the appendix, which I've just handed out, you can see that staffing, we saved a significant sum of money again, and that was, we anticipated we'd save that money, 933,000, because we put a new brewing system in place, and that we've just been waiting for those savings to materialise, which they have now. Obviously, some of that budget will now be removed for future years, so that won't continue. The other area was other supplies and services, which is where we put the money, effectively the future savings. We earmarked a pot of money that we've spent on appliances. So again, members will recall hopefully those discussions we had earlier in the year. If if anyone's got any other comments they want to make on any of the detail. I wasn't going to go through the annual Treasury Management Statement in detail. There's not a lot to say in terms of our Treasury Management activity for the year, purely because we haven't done it. We haven't borrowed a lot of money and we haven't spent much through the post. We certainly are not investing. Although we're investing, we're getting no return on our investments at the moment. We're getting less than 1% really on average. So not wonderful. However, I think that's just where the market is in general. So happy to open up to any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Rylands.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 5, expenditure, equipment, ICT. It says original budget 108, adjustments 47, revised estimate 155, but your actuals are 489. Why is that so far out from what you estimated?
Effectively what we've done in the year, again, with the money that we set aside for savings, we actually put £2 million in the revenue budget, okay, additional savings. And what we've done, we've used all that money to invest in things like our new appliances, which we've been very clear on, and also ICT equipment as well, to bring us up to a modern environment. So actually it was a known spend that we were doing, but we were financing it from our revenue budget, which is why you see that, if you look at that further down that page, you see the financing there where it says revenue contribution. Can you see that at the very bottom?
Yes.
Well, where we started there, we only thought we'd actually finance 1.5 million from our revenue budget. We actually put another 1.8 million pounds in there. So you can see the other side of, if you like, that overspend is that we're financing it from the revenue budget. So it was planned, and if you turn over to page 6 on 8.5, it actually takes you through what we spent it on. So we spent it particularly on we're doing quite extensive work on all of our IT infrastructure, but particularly it's called virtual desktop integration, which is very technical. What it means is everyone's going to get a new computer, and we're going to manage it centrally, which means that in the past people had to go out and refresh individual computers when they needed updates and things. They won't need to do that in the future. It'll all be done centrally.
Councillor Bywater.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, I think you answered one of my questions in the updated appendix, because I was looking at the debt charges. I've got a question on why is it slightly higher than the revised budget, and also on the pensions, the injury awards. I just want to know why that's increased quite significantly.
Yep. Okay. First one, debt charges. It's the same conversation we just had. Effectively, what we're doing there, we're taking that underspend above the £2 million in supplies and services, and debt charges. It should be broken down, because actually that isn't just around us servicing debt. That actually covers other aspects as well, which is us using the funding we have in revenue to buy outright fire engines, ICT equipment, and such like. So that needs to be broken down into more detail, really. Okay, so I accept that. We'll take that away and we'll make sure that's in more detail. In terms of the second one around injury awards, I suppose the straightforward answer is we have to finance our own injury award pensions. Very, very relevant at the moment with current discussions of the paper further down the agenda. And every time somebody is subject to an ill health or an injury award pension, we have to finance an upfront cost, because it's going to cost the pension pot more than we anticipate. Often they'll be going earlier than anticipated. So what we have, whilst we budget for a number each year, obviously it's very much dependent on individual circumstances, and these can be going on for years and years and years. And actually this year looks like we've had 2 more than we budgeted for. Because they're about £100,000, about £100,000 per.
There's no connection from what we can do from preventing these injuries. That's what I'm thinking as well. Is we're doing all we can to prevent.
Ill health injuries are a relative rarity now. If you go back a decade or so, perhaps a little bit longer, it was highly unusual for anyone to go out without some kind of injury-related enhancement to their pensions. It's incredibly rare now. The figures are very low. So we're probably dealing with those that are actually the most genuine cases now, and probably very deserving of those ill health awards. Very, very few that we have to deal with them.
And they also independently verify as well.
Thank you. Councillor Sales.
Thank you, Chair. One of my two questions follows on from that. The cemetery, the pension reserve is held to offset future costs associated with tax and outlay of past life retirement. Is it adequate, or is that at best? I don't mean to be rude, but best guess, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, yes, it is a best guess now ourselves. In terms of, we haven't had to call on it, largely because we've used underspend from elsewhere. So I've managed to a bottom line budget, if you like, and said actually we don't need to give into that this particular year because we've got enough in the revenue budget. In future years, if and when it does get so tight, then clearly we'd have to keep that reserve under constant review.
Okay, thank you. And the other point I wanted to ask is the Treasury Management Statement. Don't we have to approve that? I thought we have to approve it rather than vote.
You approve the Treasury Strategy Statement for the forward-looking. For this, it's a case of you note it because it's looking back and it's already happened. So you're approving the strategy in December, in February. And then this is the
do something with Treasury Statement.
Yeah, you do.
Approve, right?
Yeah, you do. You have to approve that in December, February. Yeah.
Councillor Nessinger.
My question is also about the Treasury Management Statement. It was to do the overall Treasury position and the rates of return for the rates of payment debt, which is on page 3 of the table. And
Yes.
you're paying 4.39% on debt over 40 years. And given that the 40-year rates are significantly higher than the shorter term rates, is it sensible to be borrowing for that length of time at the moment?
There's a penalty if we redeem the debt early. So we have looked at it because there's also, and without getting into the detail, there's also benefits that are paid. So, for instance, if they could put that money out for 40 years at a higher rate, then they give us if you like, a bonus for us redeeming the debt early. But at the moment, they're not getting return. So they're saying, actually, that's no good. I'm not going to be able to lend it at 4 point whatever it is. I'll only get 3%. So actually, I'm going to charge you for that. So at the moment, that's why we've locked tight. In the future, we keep reviewing it on an annual basis to see if it's advantageous for us to get rid of it and get a bonus. So we do keep it.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to make a contribution? No? In that case, can we move to the recommendation, please, on page 1, 2.1, A, B, C and D. Are you happy to note the report?
Yeah.
Agree? Thank you very much. Item 5, naming the new fire station at Burwell. Nick, are you going to speak on this one?
Yes, Peter. Afternoon, members. The purpose of the paper in front of you, as you will be aware, we are currently, and as Matthew said, we're building a brand new fire station at Burwell. And on completion of the build, as Fire Authority approved back in February last year, we will be merging Burwell and Swaffham fire stations together onto the one site. Now is sort of the appropriate time to determine the name of the new fire station at Burwell. We did go out to consultation. We spoke to both local parish councils, and as you can see in the paper, perhaps unsurprisingly, both parish councils wanted something slightly different. The view of the organisation is actually that the recommendation that the fire station is named Burwell Community Fire Station. All our fire stations are named after the geographical area they are located in, and a key point is, although our fire stations are located geographically, clearly they work in and around the local community and the wider service. So, nice and simple. From a fire service point of view, we would wish the fire station to be named.
Anybody like to make a comment? In that case, can I have a proposal, please, that we go with the recommendation? Councillor Rylands, seconder, please. Councillor Jamil. All in favour? Thank you. Don't tell me about that. Right, let's deal with the next one at the same time. Pension regulations. Matthew, would you like to open this one up, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The government's consultation on the pension regulations, it went into incredible detail, if anything, it went into incredible detail on each individual regulation proposed in the new scheme from the 1st of April 2015. A number of us have been through it in some detail. There's not an awful lot we can comment on, if I'm being honest. And the way the questions have been written, they are quite restrictive in terms of the responses that I've put together in terms of technical feedback. So I think it's worth putting it into that context. I'll go through each question, if I may, one by one. So the first question, it's on page 3 of the appendix. Basically, do the revised draft regulations continue to meet the design parameters? Yes, broadly. I mean, I could have done a one-word response there, and I tried to draw it out. Yes, it looks pretty much in line with what it was when they published the original final agreement in May 2012. There's not been any significant changes on the face of it. That's something that we can't add an awful lot more to. Question 2, do the benefits in the draft regulation sufficiently match those of the... And this is interesting, just to make all members aware here. All the questions now, from this point on pretty much, start to talk about the new firefighter pension scheme 2006. And what happened with the new firefighter pension scheme 2006 is that there was an acceptance of a retirement age of 60. Okay. So in responding to that, it was already accepted at that point, and clearly I had to say yes, they do match with the 2006 scheme, because they do. I suppose the question 3 is where I would raise perhaps some alarm bells, because we start talking in detail around the proposals for the employer additional contributions for ill health awards and the employer additional contributions for a member who has had an employer-initiated retirement. And what this means is that somebody who gets to the age of 55 in the new scheme, you will be aware now, which is obviously very contentious from a firefighter's perspective, if the employer initiates a retirement at that point based on the grounds of ill health, where the costs, I have a concern as to where the costs will be met. Now what this is saying is, does it sufficiently match the NFPS 2006 scheme? Well, yes, it does. But under that scheme, we have to pay. Okay, so going back to your point earlier, not the bywater, the cost we would be paying in the new firefighter pension scheme, whereas in the old one we wouldn't have to. So this, I'm concerned that we're being led, because of the constraint on the question, we're being led to a point which will end up, you've accepted it before, so why are you not accepting it now? So I put a caveat in the answer saying, basically, we would want government to underwrite the additional costs associated with authority-initiated retirements.
Well, if I could just add that a major obstacle in resolution to the current firefighters' dispute with the government around pensions is the threat, as the FBU puts it, of no job, no pension come the age of 55. I.e., if you can't meet the medical fitness requirements that the authority places upon you when you reach the age of 55, that you'll be dismissed from the service without any pension, having to wait till you're 67 or whatever the normal pension age is then, in order to take a pension. That's not quite true, and it's not factual. What happens at the age of 55 is that actuarial reductions apply if you have to go between the ages of 55 and 60, and some of them are quite punitive, it has to be said. So if, for example, if you were to leave at the age of 55, I think the actuarial reduction is close on to 50%. So of course, for firefighters, that's quite unpalatable. So one of the aims of the FBU is to get an undertaking from the NJC, from the employers, from local fire authorities, that should that be the case, the fire authority will in effect make a promise to firefighters that their pension will be maintained and paid. Now, what Matthew is pointing out here is that this appears to be, or could potentially be construed by DCLG as an attempt to resolve that issue through pointing us back to the 2006 pension regulations, because very clearly at the meeting that Sir Peter and I were at of the NJC, there was a unanimous decision that fire authorities would not be underwriting those costs without some form of promise from the government to make those funds available. Just so you're aware, we are talking in the region, should a firefighter live for 28 years, draw their pension for 28 years after leaving the service, which is what the actuaries suggest is the figure that we use. The average cost for those additional costs would be £250,000 per firefighter over the 28 years, which is approximately £9,000 a year for every firefighter. So it only takes a few firefighters to find themselves in that position. You'll find that you've got a significant revenue cost to find each year. So what the employers were after was pushing government to underwrite those costs themselves. Our fear in question 3 is that it could be misconstrued, misinterpreted by DCLG as an agreement that we are looking to pay those, happy to pay those costs because it's 2006. Yes, the agreement was made in 2006, but the numbers of firefighters we may be dealing with now could be significantly different and significantly increased. Thus, we think those costs might be unsustainable, and we want someone to underwrite those costs for the authority.
And if they don't?
I've got a feeling we might just be stuck with what we're stuck with, Councillor. I hate to say this, but it is a problem that might be some way off, but that shouldn't stop us from obviously considering it seriously now.
Okay, any questions on Graham's point?
No. Matthew?
So question 4, this is just really around how the administration arrangements will work in the new scheme, and it's fine, so will work as they work at the moment, so I have no particular concerns there. Question 5, this one it really is around the cost cap that's been set out. They're talking about a 27% cost cap, or gross cost ceiling. That's how much employers and employees should be contributing overall to the cost of this ongoing scheme. And I think it's inevitable that everybody will want certainty, both employees and employers, in terms of, against that going up in any way, shape or form. So really it's just a case of we all want some protection. However, I mean, you can see on page 20 of the consultation document, there's indicative contribution rates there. And they do change over the next 3-4 years slightly. But again, I can't add an awful lot more other than please try and give me certainty. But I'm also arguing for the same thing as perhaps the representative bodies would be. So not much more to add there. Number 6, contribution rates will again fine. I don't really have any particular concerns with contribution rates. We're going for a tiered rate, fair enough. And I think when we go to the career average scheme, I personally feel it should be based on actual earnings and not on full-time equivalent salaries. But again, I'm not going to get too worked up about it because I think the numbers will be relatively small compared to that. Down the route. And again, other than that, I can't add an awful lot more to any of it, because of the way they've been written, a lot of the questions. So really, that's it. Unless anybody has any questions, to take anything.
Councillor Shannon.
I've suffered some of these constrained questionnaires before, and I found that I felt much better if I put in an accompanying letter, which made the points that I wanted to make.
Absolutely.
Whether it did any good or not.
Anybody else? Graham, would you like to add?
Just around the timelines for this particular consultation, I was invited to a meeting with the Minister. Most of you might have received an update that I sent. Clearly, I think this is strategy number one for bringing the FBU dispute to a close. The intention is that this gets laid before Parliament for the required amount of time, and by late autumn probably of this year, effectively becomes a law, in which case any further strike action by the FBU around this particular pension issue would appear to be futile. In much the same way as as Matthew pointed out, the 2006 pension scheme already has a normal pension age of 60, which is now law. However, the FBU never actually agreed to it being 60. It now is 60 by effect. I think the same strategy applies to this. If I struggling to negotiate my way around this, then by the time late autumn comes, it will effectively be a done deal.
Thank you. Councillor Giles.
What sort of percentage are we talking about contribution to the pension?
By it's got on page 20. The employee varies from, in 2015-16 it'll be between 10 and 14.5%.
Oh right, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. They're looking for an average effectively of 13.2% is where they're looking to get to, and then the employer will pay effectively the 13.8 up to the cap, which is what we're talking about. So. But bear in mind, at the moment, as an employer, we pay 21.3% on the firefighter pension scheme.
That's the figure I was looking at.
Yeah,
21%.
we pay 21.3% at the moment. Yeah.
It's a bit different to the private sector, isn't it?
In the proposed scheme, Councillor, the contribution from the employers is about 14%. So there's a reduction there.
It's still a reduction. They're looking to average it out, bring the reduction up.
Right. So where does the 21% come?
That's the old scheme. So that's the current scheme that firefighters. There's the 1992 scheme. There's going to be goodness knows how many schemes when we move to the new one. So you've got 21.3% on the new scheme. I think it's about 14% on the 2000. Sorry. Let me get. In the 1992 scheme, we pay 21.3%.
Ah, right.
Okay. There's a 2006 scheme, which is about 14%, I think, off the top of my head. I can't exactly remember that figure, but it's around that figure. And then in the new firefighter scheme, which is what we're talking about here, they're talking around 13.8%.
Oh right, so it is going.
So it's going
Oh right, okay.
Can I pick up? Does that mean that although we are going to have increased risk on the basis of potentially having to pay more for firefighters who are ill between 55 and 60, our actual overall contributions will drop gradually?
Absolutely.
Because we will not be paying them more. Okay, that's good.
One of the fears of officers in making a promise about firefighters' pensions is that there is a potential then for nobody to ever consider working beyond the age of 55, because if we promise to underwrite the pension, there seems to be no incentive at all to work beyond 55. And that's another area that the government has yet to.
Councillor Shallons.
Can Matthew tell me, is this administered by Cambridgeshire County Council? In that case, I think I belatedly need to wake up and declare an interest as I sit on the bench.
Okay, anybody else would like to make any comments on the questions or the attendance? No? In which case, can we approve the questions as set out in the answers? Everybody happy? Right. Now, please don't rush away, because we're going to have a very short briefing after the meeting. What we'll do is have a 5-minute company chat. But Graham, I think you want to make a statement about what may be said tomorrow.
Well, the FBU executive have got a national executive have a meeting starting tomorrow. There's a lot of Twitter activity and other social media activity calling for strikes of longer duration. Much of it as a result of this pension regulation coming out and the timelines associated with that pension regulation. I think the message to the FU executive seems very clear, which is you've got until sort of April to try and put some, or late autumn really, to try and put some pressure on. So the FU executive, I think, has a difficult choice in front of them, either to roll over or come to some kind of deal very quickly, or escalate action. From a personal perspective, I think that would be very difficult and unfortunate, but there's a little bit of me that unfortunately thinks it's slightly inevitable at this stage as well. But obviously we'll keep you informed as and when the FBU executive makes its announcement, either tomorrow or Wednesday if it goes over, which it has done the last couple of times.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Graham on that particular point? In which case,
Sorry, can I have a
yes.
question? We had a discussion some time ago, a few months ago, about what would happen if the FBU escalate, which didn't necessarily come, we came to a kind of slightly fresh conclusion. We should rediscuss that. Well, it's probably better to do that until
I know what you're talking about, Council. I mean, yeah,
Not very good.
it was quite a, for me, quite a clear function. I had a conversation this morning. That my intention then was to say that if the Fire Brigade Union were to start setting strikes that had on a regular basis, that had very minimal impact on their members but massive impact on contingency crews. So if every other day you went on strike for 1 hour at 2 o'clock in the morning, for example, then we might want to consider doing something. But if the FBU is determined to go on strike for 4 days or 8 days, that's a whole different matter. And in effect, they're losing their money for all those days anyway. So it becomes irrelevant. But they're not doing it just to be a nuisance to contingency crews. And that's all I was looking for, was just in case, and then having a conversation. If they escalate in that way, I don't see it as an issue.
Well, that concludes the business of the meeting, everyone. Thank you for coming.